Hi, and welcome to Aging in Place for every stage in life. What if you could visit or have a home that would accommodate anyone at any age, any physical ability, at any time? How cool would that be? That's what we're doing here at Aging in Place. Why me? Because I'm a doctor of psychology and I specialize in physical spaces and health and wellness. Also, I love designing with intent at any age. Why now? Because we, the baby boomers, want to age in place gracefully, and we want our families around us as much as we can. And why you, the audience? Because we want you to experience what it's like to have a home that's safe, aesthetically pleasing, and that you can live in at any age, with any ability, at any time. I'd like to introduce you now to Aging in Place podcast for every stage in life. Okay. Hi, and welcome to Aging in Place for any stage in life. I'm Dr. Debi Lynes. I am here with Ira Yellen. Thank you so much. He has the Aging in Place toolkit. And as I was just talking, Ira, you and I were chatting. Our producer is like, wow, you guys, you are missing some really great material that our listeners would love to hear. So we just are starting the interview in real life now, correct? Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for asking.
Ira, if you could talk to me a little bit about your background, your history, and how in the world you even got into this.
Well, for me, I would say it was when I was a teenager, 14, 15 years old, in 1962. So actually, prior to that, I was actually 10 years old. My father had his first heart attack. He was only 38 years old. And I was watching what was going through and looking what the caregiving was going on in our family at that age, where my mother, they had a family business. My father had a very successful family business. And my mother kind of was the bookkeeper and everything. And in 1962, he died at the age of 42. He was just born with a bad heart.
So sorry.
And so what happened is same in my grandfather, and I saw what early stages of saying what's going through a combination of grief, caregiving, and I recognized unconsciously that this was I was the only family in this town where I lost my father. So it started from that point saying, what happens when you have a surprise? What do you do, particularly your child? And seeing then as I had aging relatives, aunts and uncles, seeing what they were going through as I was, in my early teens, going to college and so forth, it seemed to be something I was always interested in. And it actually culminated, I went to Pratt studied design, which we did get into rehabbing in the late 60s. They had a grant from the federal government to how do you take a brownstone. In fact, we saw it in New York Times this weekend. They had a whole article on aging in place. How can you stain your brownstone?
Right, I saw that.
And so anyway, all this evolved, and I went to Pratt, studied it, and afterwards got involved more in the communication side and design side of things, and did a lot of design work. And then I'd say around 15 years ago, I created around 30 years ago an advertising marketing firm, and was involved with a lot of healthcare, hospitals, clinics. And at the tail end of all this, I got involved with home care agencies.
Okay.
And that was around 2005 or so.
When you talk about design, sorry for interrupting you, typically or specifically, what kind of design were you doing?
Well, it was mostly, how do you take an existing building where you're living, or in a case with a lot of commercial work, but even within households, adapting to change, adapting to what's going on. And even though there wasn't anything formal, I recognized I was doing some design work to make it more comfortable for them. There wasn't any aging in place strategy.
Well, sure,
as
exactly.
You probably know. There was nothing going on. So it was an evolutionary thing. And then my wife's mother and her aunt and my mother, over a period of 10 years, we did do the caregiving.
Okay.
And we did it at a distance. My wife's mother lived in town, and she lived with us. And then when her mother died, she had to take care of her aunt, who was in Boston, commuting back and forth. And then my mother, who was they're all in their 90s.
Sure.
And we saw long-distance caregiving really just get embedded, as much as I even got involved simultaneously within the industry itself, and recognizing that there were a lot of challenges. I said, I'm not the only one going through all this stuff.
Sure.
And I saw this stress because even though my sister was in Florida, my mother was down there, and that, and trying to take care of her, and in a place where we were actually subsidizing her to
Sure.
live comfortably, to do it. And then when she died, recognizing that there's many more families that had to do this. So I then created this website called the Aging in Place Essential Toolkit, saying,
Pretty cool.
let me just share these stories. Recognizing I'm not a medical advisor at all. It was more about how family caregiving, and the more research I did is that this was an industry or an area of healthcare that was completely being ignored because there's no money in it for industry. The hospitals, the doctors, insurance companies, they didn't want to do this stuff.
Right.
So it was left to home care agencies, families, and as you probably know, there's 40 to 50 million every year doing caregiving. And I said, and since I had a good background in communications and the internet and understanding that, and I created this company, got a group of caring investors who've been through it themselves, and around 5 years ago, we created this place where people can come share their stories through forums and fill out surveys where we respond back, or just come in and try to find resources. So this last year, we finished basically a major beta test, it's called, in Massachusetts and Connecticut, saying what's the best way we can streamline it. And so we are now launching a whole campaign for the year. It's called Pay Now or Paying Later. If you don't do something now, you're going to pay your price.
Pay now or paying later.
Yep.
I love that.
And baby boomers are the worst ones at doing this.
Oh,
and
because we still think we're kids.
We'd still think tomorrow we're going to go see Woodstock.
That's exactly
and that's
right.
the mentality of what we have. And I interviewed over 500 family caregivers, have done many presentations, involved with a program called Mass Challenge Health Tech. These are all accelerator programs, seeing what's going on in the biotech, digital, artificial intelligence. And so I was mentoring a lot of young companies trying to integrate. So I realized this is a bigger scope project. So a personal experience, I had the background professionally, and wanted to leave some legacy stuff and saying, okay, how can we use the internet more effectively? How can people, they go there and at least, get triggered to do something? And we get dozens of calls every day from people who are so desperate, we can't service them all. And so we decided that, how are you going to get this together? We recognize public policy is failing a lot of these areas. The middle class is stressing out. So there was a policy side, an implementation, and then kind of like a social enterprise approach. But I recognize I had to raise money in order to sustain it.
Sure. I think it's been interesting the longer I've gotten into this. I think many of us started out very organically because we had loved ones who were going through something, and all at once you recognize that there is no recipe book to follow, nor is there a phone book for access or resources. The more I've gotten into this, the more I'm becoming aware of the public policy part of this, that I just hadn't thought about it in that kind of macro scope. And now I can't even go anywhere without checking out mass transportation. It's really been fascinating. And I know you are becoming a CAP certified designer also, which I think just adds a depth and breadth to everything that we're talking about.
Yes, because I'm recognizing, number one, it's going to be a boom area. Baby boomers are going to wake up one day so that, their mobility is going to be a big issue for them. Dementia is going to start setting in. I have some relatives now in their early 70s who are facing it. They were active, busy, high-level professionals. And I tell them, I said, listen, I had open heart surgery 20 years ago. I know what it's like even in early years to go through all this and still live with it. And so, number one, you got to take care of your health. Actually, number one, you have to have a loving wife. That's really the golden key.
There you
much
go.
Better they're much better healthcare managers than guys. Guys are
Let me say that. I will agree with that. We women are good at managing our health. Go ahead. Affirmation.
And children and everything. I'm absolutely convinced there wouldn't be any world without women really managing this stuff.
I love that.
And they should be more recognized for it. I grew up in a household of all women, so I surrendered many years ago.
I was going to say, or your wisdom. You're a very wise man.
Well, I appreciate the kind thought, but I'm sure it's the same for you. But involving all this stuff, it's just like it is so overwhelming. You have to kind of focus. Otherwise, you go down all these rabbit holes. A rabbit hole being you want to go there, but you recognize it's not going to really solve anything. Margaret Mead, who I worked with in my early years, said, it just takes a village, but it also takes a couple of people come together. And that's what I do. We try to gather people together and recognize we have to address this, and it involves all the things I've talked to you before.
Ira, I would love to take a quick break here and come back and really chat about this toolkit specifically and how people can participate and then exactly what it looks like. So stay with us. We'll be right back here on Aging in Place podcast for any stage in life. Hi, I'm Dr. Debi Lynes. Design elements are psychologically and physically supportive and conducive to health and wellness. To learn more about what Lines on Design can do for you, for more information on certified aging in place and facilitative and supportive design, look for us at linesondesign.com. That's LYNES on design.com. We are back here on Aging in Place podcast. Again, we are here with Ira Yellen, and we're talking about aging in place. We're talking about his toolkit. And we're talking about as we get older, whether we're caretakers or actually the folks who are becoming elder, how we can manage gracefully and efficiently. So again, thank you so much for joining us. You're the perfect person and really fun to interview because you're so knowledgeable. You've got a wealth of information. I'm dying to know about the toolkit and how we use it.
Well, we had to kind of reverse engineer it in saying, we have to understand, number one, how people search for certain things and how they go about doing it. So you had to understand the psychology of how are people searching, what kind of terms they use, and then looking at the tools. So you're then looking at Google, Facebook, and your Twitter, all the major social media tools. That's our background. Versus most people approach it from, I'm Bill that they will come, and that's that famous movie, Field of Dreams.
Field of Dreams, Kevin Costner, yeah. Ignore that.
I said, no,
okay.
Just ignore that. You have to go how the way people think, and they think in short phrases and so forth. So we had to develop a series of phrases and words and tools and understanding how, the best way to use Google ads, the best way to use Facebook booster ads, the best way to use YouTube. All those have different kind of niches. And so the first thing we did was deep research. Who we wanted to reach women. We knew we had to reach women 50 to 70 years of old.
Okay.
That is around 85% of our audience.
Oh, wow.
We already know that. We've tested it out for 2 years. So what happened is saying, what are they concerned about? And, and what they were concerned about, several areas, and there are always 5 major areas. One is, how am I going to, if I have a family now, I'm sandwiched in, I have an older, my parents usually, and then I have kids I'm still raising, or even they're college, the millennial types, and also deal with managing my, my parents' health and getting through all that, and then also minimizing my stress and finding ways and resources that I might not have a lot of. So taking this together became pretty standard because we have a survey instrument on our website. People fill it out, and so we respond back, and we saw mostly what they're interested in. They're looking for resources. They're saying, I don't have an elder care attorney. I don't have all my financial planning down.
Okay.
I don't have a plan. Should I add to our house? Should I remodel it so my elderly mom and dad can move in? Or do I, they're far away. How am I going to match them at a distance? So we saw all these different things. So we had to kind of adapt and say, okay, you self-describe your situation and you describe what you think you need. And then our website offers many different ways of for getting free information, or then hooking up to a home care agency, to an elder care attorney. So we're aggregating a tool. So this toolkit has the multiple ways, and we're trying to make it easier for people now, and in terms of how they put this all together as a package. So we're actually packaging this, and some of it's trial and error.
Okay, go ahead.
In order for them to say, you need to think of all these things. Because if you don't do the plan now, you're going to run into these rabbit holes. And so that's where we are right now in terms of doing it. So we have a lot of free stuff. And then how we charge right now, we don't charge families at all. It's just people who are providing the services or products.
That was my next question, is because we have to paint a picture with our words, because we don't have anything that we can see. How do people get to the website? What are some of the key words? What can they expect? How is it laid out? I actually have it here so I can kind of see, but for the people who may not.
Yeah, well, if you go there, depending what search terms, you might not end up on our homepage because searching doesn't work that way. We like to get our homepage because everything's organized on that. But many times, because the way they might say, I'm in Massachusetts and I'm looking for a home care agency. And so, voila, that's what they're going to. So they're going to find that. Or most of the time, they end up our homepage. Last year, what did we get? Between Connecticut and Massachusetts, we had 150,000 hits.
Wow.
Just for 2 states. And we then saw where they were going, what they were looking for. And, and then we prioritized it too, because the most important things that we thought aging baby boomers had to deal with is that, they needed to do some analysis. Do they have some sort of medical directives? Do they have a plan? If you have multiple siblings, who's going to be in charge? Things that most people don't do. Only the ones with a lot of money tend to do this, because our focus is mostly in the middle class right now.
Okay.
People, even if people with a lot of money don't do it right, but for the most part, they have attorneys and planners who take care of this. These are people probably, I would say, are in between making their revenue, if they're still working jointly, is anywhere between $50,000 and $120,000.
Do I sign in? Are there newsletters? Are there things
they have an option of they can become a member.
Okay.
And they will get more information from us, or they can just sign in.
Okay.
And they will then receive information as requested. And then we have people who fill out surveys, which is even the highest level.
Oh, what a great way to collect data.
And then we also track where people are looking and what they're doing. Then we modify it accordingly. And again, we know Facebook is a big driver for us. Okay. It's called the boost section. It's an area where you can highly put in focus to the demographics.
Okay.
So I kind of explain how it works. So if people are going there, whatever terms they do around aging in place, caregiving, will show up.
Oh.
And so if they're saying aging in place, Connecticut, aging in place, that we are now the number one. We come up number one. The thing we've been tracking, Debbie, is the term aging in place. When we started this 5 years ago, only 4% of the folks out there were using the term. It's over 50% now, over 5 years. So the term is becoming a vernacular that's being used.
It's really interesting because on my little Google alerts, I put in, anything that comes up with aging in place, and it's, I'm getting more and more and more and more. And now it's sort of disseminating the information.
Well, you get the ads, you got the placement, you got Google locations. I know, kind of explaining, this is all like, making a sausage. But I'm not sure your viewership. It's important to know if you go to our site, we have various different ways that it can get you going, no matter where you are in the United States. And we do get many, many phone calls. We do answer them all. And in terms of saying, where can I go? Like just before you went on here, someone in Massachusetts couldn't find, Massachusetts is a very unique state. They have a thing called ASAPs. It's a step above Medicaid. In other words, the state made a decision. They want to keep people out of nursing homes.
Okay.
So they provide additional funding for people who don't qualify under Medicaid. And it's managed by these aging councils throughout the whole state. Every state is different if you're getting into regular, if you're getting to Medicare or Medicaid mostly.
Right.
And there's unfortunately many people living by themselves who are older and they're lonely. They don't know what to do.
Isolation.
So even though we don't make any money do it, we will help them go to the proper place and who to call. Because it's this is more of we have a mission focus to it, and we also have an idea of just kind of bopping boomers or anyone on the head saying, organize, plan, wait it out, because it's going to happen.
From a mission
one way
point
or
of
another.
from a mission point of view, how would you describe what your actual mission is? And then we're going to take a break and come back and talk about moving forward.
Yeah, it's mostly, I believe education's the key to all this. It's something will trigger people. It's either it's the fear factor or the rewards. It's reward and punishment. And so most people, or their fear or their thing, we're in the age of kind of like insecurity age right now.
Exactly. I would say that for sure.
In many ways, it's helping us. It's not the best way society should function. And saying, gee, I just running across this, or particularly when also in a medical condition either affects them or a loved one. And, and then afterwards, if they're on Medicare, they only get 20 days of coverage. And after that, what am I going to do? And so I had to deal with that with my mother. So anyway, that's, if we can help them educate, we have these education sections. Here's where you can go. Here's what you should know. And, if you need to get more information, just fill out the survey and we'll direct you in a proper area.
Okay. So where do I find it?
It's aginginplacetoolkit.com.
One of the things that I've been thinking about, and that your toolkit seems to do very efficiently, is talk about safety and security. Specifically, I noticed that there's a section on falling. Can you share with us a little bit about what technology has to offer and some strategies that you have in this toolkit?
Yes, there's been research done that falling is by far the most serious thing that happens to anyone, usually over the age of 80. And that sometime or other, up until in the 90s, it's projected 90% of the aging population is going to fall.
Wow.
And so hopefully nothing happens. In my family, my mother-in-law and my mother, that's basically started the downfall for them, that eventually where they died. What's existing today, in fact, I'm even wearing now, is called Apple Watch Health. And on it, it has, if you fall down, and you don't get up in 15 seconds, it sends an alert to you, and you push the button, and it'll dial 911 automatically.
Oh, wow.
There are some other devices to do this. And so it says, do you need help right now? And you're saying, I can't move, or whatever the case. In fact, I can cue it in if I wanted to do that. And so it will then protect you to do it. So these are technologies that you could wear all the day and around, and also would send automatic alert to a close relative or one of their children.
And one of the things that I love to do in my podcast is a little shameless promotion also. And I will tell you that the Aging in Place Essential Toolkit is a must go to. Take the time to really look at it. There's a lot of information packed into one site. So again, Ira, thank you so much for joining us. We want to thank all of you for joining us here on Aging in Place podcast for any stage in life.
For more podcast episodes, links, information, and media inquiries, please visit our website at aginginplacepodcast.com as we transition through life with the comfort and ease you deserve. Discover how you can create a home that will adapt to you as you journey through life and the changes it will bring. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as our host, Debi Lynes, and her expert guests discuss relevant topics to creating a home for all decades in life. Don't miss our weekly episodes of Aging in Place podcast for every stage in life.
Pretending is fun, but let's get real. I have two daughters who loved to play house growing up. They would follow me along on Saturdays, and I cleaned the house top to bottom, and sometimes one of the girls would pretend she was even the family dog. Anyway, one year at Christmas, I gave each of them a hand sweeper, a broom, a dust mop, and I'm not talking toys, I'm talking real ones. I instantly became the best mom, Santa ever. I followed Christmas with squirt bottles to clean windows. At Easter, to make birthday special, they got a roll of paper towels and a scrub brush. I'm not kidding. Now keep in mind, this probably only works with the children under the age of 10, not so much with teenagers. But as long as they like to play house, make it real. Many hands make work light. Who knew? And by the way, if you have to go behind them to do it your way, just don't let them find out.
Ira, you were a wonderful interview today. With every podcast, we do a takeaway. And I think the takeaway today is pretty simple. Aging in Place Essential Toolkit, a must-have for anyone at any age. Have a wonderful week.
Aging in Place podcast is hosted by Debi Lynes and produced by Henrik de Gior. If you have any comments or questions, send an email to debbie@aginginplacepodcast.com. We would love to hear from you. If you're interested in advertising or sponsoring this podcast, email us at pr@aginginplacepodcast.com. Thank you for listening to Aging in Place Podcast.